I don't want to say ultramarathons are easy, but I think they're easier than they might seem to people.
Do you suggest working with a coach does help for people to at least get better at it?
And that first coach was, he was useful to me. Like I guess he taught me how to structure a week a little bit. And then what he did also was simply the act of taking on a coach just made me more serious about, I suppose, things like lifestyle, things like drinking alcohol or going to bed and getting enough sleep. And, just being more serious about my training. Coffee is nearly as popular nowadays, but I've just never liked coffee. It seems like a really sort of brash, over-aggressive taste. I don't know if 11 cups of tea is a bit of an unhealthy habit, but a bit like the running, if I am addicted, there are many worse things.
Damian, welcome to Run with Fitpage. It's our weekly show, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks so much for having me along.
Like we were speaking backstage, almost everybody who does ultra running is a fan of you in one way or another, and also because the kind of story, the journey that you've had, and it at times is unbelievable from where you started, and in a very short period you have gotten from being an absolute beginner to being at the pinnacle of ultra running, and we thought we'll go through that journey today. But before we get into that, how about we start with a background of yours as to how was your childhood like? Were you a sportsman in your childhood? Did you do any other endurance sport, or running was the first thing that you did much later?
Thank you. Yeah, growing up, my parents weren't into sport at all, actually. I do remember my dad might go for a jog maybe once a week or once a fortnight. I can remember him doing up his trainers to go for a run. I think that was primarily for health. I never remember him doing any events. But I remember thinking that was a healthy, had that idea that was a healthy. My dad's always been pretty healthy, even in his 70s now. But at school, I loved football. And I thought the idea of running without a ball seemed quite a boring idea. I much preferred football, and I wanted to. If I'm honest, I always felt like the new kid at school, and because I moved schools a few times, and I wanted to join in with the cool kids. I wanted to play football with them. Now, I do remember doing some cross countries. Like they would sometimes for our PE lesson, they would say, "Right, cross country today. Off you'll go up and down some hills." And I remember automatically I was quite good. I was in the top 10 in a big school, and then later on, when more people got into sort of smoking and drinking, and I was a bit slower with that stuff, I did win some cross country races. It's just a few local schools. So I had some sort of, and I was always active, climbing trees, playing football, riding my bike. So I was always quite active and quite fit, but I just didn't have a passion for running, I suppose. So I played football for about 25 years. I was pretty rubbish. Often at school I was, substitute for the school team, which isn't that rubbish, but that's the level I was at. I was never going to be signed by Arsenal. But it baffles me a bit now that I spent so many years playing football, although I did enjoy it. And then I was 36 and I was just feeling a bit unfit. And I was living in Bath in England, and they have quite a big half marathon in Bath. And I just remember seeing the signs up. I'd only recently moved to Bath. And I remember thinking, maybe I'll give that a go, get fit again. And this is 2011, what's that, 14 years ago. And I just loved it. I suppose I loved the event itself, but afterwards I realized I'd loved the training of pushing myself a bit further each time, of feeling those improvements, of kind of, when a run gets quite difficult when you go to a further distance. I remember going past an hour for the first time, and it was hard. It was hard, but coming home and you suddenly feel really satisfied, don't you? And that sort of happy exhaustion. And so I realized I'd loved the event, I'd loved the training. I mean, I was still playing some football at the time, and I became a parent around then. And I realized running did fit becoming a new parent much better than football. But yeah, the next year I was doing that same half marathon again. I'd already signed up for my first marathon, which I ran dressed as a toilet, because I was raising money for Water Aid. And I thought my friends were only going to sponsor me. I could pick between a tap and a toilet. And I thought, there are some better jokes if I run dressed as a toilet. My friends are more likely to sponsor me. And indeed, in the race, I was regularly shouted at, "You look a bit flushed, mate." I hope that makes sense to your audience. and all sorts of there are all sorts of bad puns that could be made about getting the runs and so on. But yeah, I still it was hard. I properly hit the wall on 17 miles, the furthest I'd ever run. But again, on the finish line, I just loved it. And during that time, I was a journalist actually, so I pestered a magazine and said, I've fallen in love with running. I want to write about running for you, and they said, okay, but not that story. We want you to go and run your first ultra marathon. And I had a vague idea of what that was, but I didn't know anyone who did that, and I'd only just this magazine was quite new, and I'd read one or two stories, but it's much easier, isn't it, once you already know someone, like your friend's done it. It's kind of easier, isn't it? But I didn't know anyone. Um, and oh, actually, sorry, I knew one person in Australia. I remember emailing him nervously, actually, saying, what's it like?" And he did say he. I remember him saying it was SK. He was called, or Steve. I remember him saying, "You won't believe it, but it's kind of addictive. Like you'll probably do more." And I was thinking, "No way, I'll just do this once." And yeah, I did an ultra marathon. It was a 2-day one, 69 miles over 2 days, and but even more than the marathon, I thought I loved this because it was more off road. I guess really it wasn't easier, but it was kind of slower. There was more a sense of community. I love the aid stations, and straight away I just thought, wow, this is my thing. So the next year I was doing my first 100K 100 kilometer race, and also my first 100-mile race. And I was just fascinated in the distance. Like, if I can cover that distance, then probably I can go a bit more. And what does that feel like? And can I do it? Um, and then within that, the next January after that, so my fifth race, I was doing. I don't know if your audience know the Spine race, but that was my fifth race, 268 miles.
269 miles, if I'm not wrong.
Well, if we get into the technicalities, officially it's 268. Really, it's about 261 or two, really. But it's long. It's long, and it's in the winter here, which isn't it's not like winter in the Himalayas, but it's dark nearly all the time, and it's very wet. It's not super cold, really, but it gets very wet and boggy and slow and muddy. And that was my fifth race, and I was just so in love with it. And I completed that, and I was just like totally in love with this new sport. The bit I've left out, I suppose, is that I did love trekking, and a little bit of mountaineering. So I have been briefly to India, and I've been over to I did the Everest Base Camp trek, and all around the world I've done the Inca Trail and lots of treks in New Zealand and Australia. So I think that had helped me too, I suppose, just hiking, being a bit uncomfortable for several days, carrying a pack, I suppose, learning to eat a pie as you climb a hill, navigate a bit. Those sorts of things were already fairly normal to me, I suppose. So I think that did help me too. And the Spine race especially felt as much about sort of hill skills, what we call hill skills, hiking
Yeah.
skills, as running. But yeah, I got so carried away that 4 years later, 2016, I think it was. Yeah, I was in the GB trail running team. I'd sort of got so into it that I wasn't actually winning many races, but I was getting competitive, and I was in the GB team. So I really got carried away.
Wow, wow. What a story. Like 2011, starting with Bath Half to, it just seemed like almost everything came very quickly after. Um, when we talk about running and we talk about progression, I see and hear from everyone that your progression should be gradual, small, and then you keep making progress. Here it seems you you progress quite far quite quickly, and so now the very next question that must be coming in our listeners' mind is, how did you go about even thinking and training any of it? Because it doesn't seem like it's easy to even attempt, or rather even to start to think about these things. While I look at it in the hindsight, it just seems everything came together, but there must have been so much more to it. How did you go about it?
I mean, I guess there's a degree of so I was still I've been playing football regularly. Like I would play sort of three times a week, so there would have been some fitness from that, and I guess that's more the speed work side
Yeah.
of things. And then I would still hike, at weekends. There'd often be a walk. I suppose not epic, but 3 or 4 hours hill walking. So this is how I'm getting into running. So that what I can see now is there was already some strength and some fitness. So it wasn't like I just started running. Yeah, as I say, running for football. I can see now. I think some people, if they'd just jumped in from a half marathon to the spine race in about 3 years, I guess that was. A lot of people would get injured. And did I have any little niggles? I mean, I did have a coach along the way. I sort of bumped into one by accident. So I did have a coach for some of that time, but not all of his advice was good, if I'm honest. But I guess he did teach me to sort of, well, I guess train a bit sensibly in terms of progressing the volume. I think for a while there I was training at about sort of, around 40 miles a week, which I think is, for me at that time was fairly sustainable. I mean, I went on to
Yeah.
train a lot harder than that, probably double that in later years. But I can see looking back, and there was also, I would also cycle to work a bit as well. So there was some cross training. So I can see now that I was almost accidentally training fairly sensibly. I know it doesn't look sensible in terms of how quickly I've progressed in distances, but
Yeah.
I guess I was getting some advice, and I was doing quite mixed. I wasn't doing any deliberate strength work back then, but yeah, I guess I was still in my 30s. I guess I was mixing it up a bit in terms of being on hills, playing football, cycling, and then I was relatively sensible in the training, I suppose. So I think that was it. I think those things kept me injury free at the time.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think, yeah, provide the context makes so much sense because when, if people just think of it, they starting their first half and then go on to do spine race in the next 3 to 5 years, definitely is not the possibly right target for everyone to go towards. It may not take them as far. But understanding the context is so important, as you said, is that you had been, just that you were not running in a race for that matter, but you were training in multiple other ways, maybe more naturally, maybe through cycling, through hiking, through football and various other things that you were doing. So you were fairly active anyway, just that the sport was not being done, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to sum it up. I mean, another thing to consider really is that something like the spine race, for those who have done, really long ones, I mean, how much of it do you really run, if I'm honest? Like 40 or 50% on the spine race, really? Because if you're going up a big hill, we're all hiking it, and I think that's sensible. And that hill it takes twice as long to climb up the hill as it does to run down the other side. So a fair bit of it is sort of hiking. For the spine race, I used hiking poles as well, which may have helped me a little bit. Although I must say, when I finished the spine, I was a bit broken, and it was probably a few weeks before I ran again. It did get a bit painful. I had all sorts of it hurt in new places. But yeah, you take some time off. So I guess effectively I was kind of injured at the end of the spine race, but yeah, you just take the time to recover. But when I look back, it was almost accidentally sensible
Yeah.
in terms of in terms of a lot of cross training.
Yeah. Nice way to put it. And if we look at last 1.5 decade of your running journey, and you've achieved so much. And if you look at it from a beginner's perspective, and I'm asking this is because India also is at a cusp of ultra running explosion in many ways. We are getting to see more and more longer distance races. We are getting to see high altitude longer distance races, desert long distance races that have been coming up, and we are seeing trail runs becoming more and more popular. So if there is a beginner who is listening to this conversation and they are at a half or a marathon kind of distances currently, while it might sound very novice to you because where you are, but if you were to talk about some of the suggestions that might work for each of them or any of them who's at a very early stage of their ultra running journey, what would some of those be?
I think the first thing that springs to mind is that I've got to be careful how I say this, but I do think ultra running is kind of easier than it sounds. In that often these races have big numbers. 100 kilometers is a big number, and that's a bit intimidating. But if then again you look at how much time the event allows you to cover that distance, usually it's very, very reasonable. And I often at these events in Britain anyway, there are sort of hikers, strong walkers, who will turn up and just hike it all. It's probably, it's a smaller percentage. It's probably 20% perhaps, just as a rough guess of the people on the start line. But some of them, for most events, there are people who just turn up and hike it fast. And most of us can, over fairly flat terrain, most of us fairly fit people can move at about 3 miles an hour. And even at the front end of the race, we are, depends on how steep the hill is and where it is in the race and stuff. But most of us are power hiking the uphills, really,
Right.
especially when it gets steep. So I would almost say, don't think of it as a running race. Think of it as a foot race or a foot event or a foot challenge. And it's just how efficiently, how can you move? Yeah, how quickly can you move over that terrain in a combination of running and hiking? And we joke over here that ultra runners don't run; they sort of shuffle, because towards the end anyway, it doesn't really look much. It looks more like a walk than even when we think we're running. It looks more like a walk than a sort of an actual run. It's nothing like the 100-meter runners on the track. It's more like a race walker.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say ultra marathons are easy, but I think they're easier than they might seem to people. So I think you can move fairly, not slowly, but there's a good amount of time. Um, there's a lot of usually over here anyway. There's lots of aid stations full of good snacks, and that's part of the joy of it. And we do sort of say, it's an eating competition with some light exercise thrown in. Um, and that was one of my big revelations. Was like it was like a children's birthday party, without all the balloons and any children. It was just like cake and crisps and sweets and fizzy drinks. I was just like, wow, I can just help myself to all of this. And of course, one of the secrets is to keep eating as you go. So I'd say, and then usually it's better scenery than a road race.
Yeah.
And then usually there's a better sense of community as well, I think. I definitely that first race, I felt like we're all in this together. We're not racing each other. Of course, there were some people at the front racing, but most of us felt like, I'd make new friends and run with someone and chat, and then run with someone else and chat. And it just felt like we're all trying to get to the end together, and no one really cared about the time. And even afterwards, compared to road running and marathon running, you go back to work in an office perhaps, and if someone, you don't want to boast about it, but if someone says, what do you do at the weekend? And you sort of say, oh, I did a 100K race. Almost no one says, well, what time did you, what was your time? No one knows what a good time is for 100K really outside of running. So they're just really impressed that you covered 100K, and they don't really care if you walked a bit as well. I mean, who would? So, yeah, I would say it's less intimidating than it sounds. Yeah, hopefully that's, and I don't really also think you have to do epic training either. I mean, of course, the fitter you get, the easier it will be. But like I say, for me, in those early couple of years, I was probably running an average of sort of 40 miles a week. I mean that will be a lot to some people, but people at the top end are running, sort of 100 miles, and yeah, we don't need to do anything like that.
Yeah, yeah. When you say this, I can see so much of love for this sport, so much of simplicity. Quite honestly, right? I've never seen this kind of analogy. That enjoying the food, yes. But I remember when I did my 100K, I was thinking I have to eat this also so that I can get to the finish line. And 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 when you talk about it, just seems so enjoyable. And so I guess, yeah, that's how great people do things as well. Very, very enjoyable for sure. Now, when we look at on the other side of the spectrum, that is from a beginner's journey, I get it. But now, what you did, you graduated and graduated quite significantly. That is, moved up the ladder, went to UTMB, went to Barkley, and you attempted something that is almost impossible to complete as well. Very limited number of people have gone and completed Barkley, particularly. How was that journey? How one is to just dream big, I get it, but when I think of being sleep deprived for such a long period and you are just alone with nature, no sense of community here. I'm thinking there's no one to support literally, and you have to find your way, navigate your way through. How did you manage?
Well, with the Barkley Marathons, yeah, when I first heard of it, I remember a local. The thing is, yeah, you meet more and more runners, and other runners have bad ideas in terms of which events to do and so on. And when I first heard of the Barkley Marathons, I suppose I thought, that's just crazy. I'm never going to do that. But then,
Mm,
but then over the years, I was ticking off. I suppose I was drawn to the more challenging races, like in Britain, I guess the Spine Race, and then the next one is usually the Dragon's Back race. So I did both of them, and then there was a lot of fuss about UTMB. And that was, it's got a huge draw. And I did that race, or started that race 5 times, completed it 4 times, and then did Tour de Gion 3 times. I was almost not running out of things to do, but it was almost like I would keep getting asked, yeah, but in podcasts and interviews, yeah, but what about the Barkley Marathons? And it was almost getting annoying. It was almost like, oh, well, I've got to really. But also, I suppose I got to know, I suppose, yeah, the American John Kelly, who's
Yeah.
completed it 3 times. And ironically, your audience probably don't know, but he lived in Britain for about 3 years, and he actually lived in the next county to me. And we didn't meet
Oh,
up very much because it was lockdown for the COVID pandemic. But yeah, he was only sort of 30, 40 minutes away, and we did go for a run together. Um, I took him out to some local hills, but I was just hanging out with him a bit, I suppose, and chatting in WhatsApp a lot. And I guess the idea just keeps growing and growing. And after a while, it's like, well, I've done some of the races I wanted to do. What is there left? And that is the big one, and it honestly is the hardest. As we all sort of suspect, it is the hardest one I've ever tried. And yeah, your motivations have to be quite different, actually. I mean, what I find, yeah, there's almost no crowd there. There's only 40 runners. I mean, you're really doing it for yourself. I know there's a lot of fuss online, afterwards, and I've
yeah.
had 2 goes, and certainly after that first attempt, I was, yeah, lots of people wanted to interview me and stuff, even though I hadn't finished. Um, there was a lot of interest, but when you're there, it's lovely and peaceful and quiet, and um, you really have to be self motivated. But what I find is, yeah, I mean, nearly everyone who's finished it I think everyone. I think it's fair to say everyone is a scientist or an engineer, and I'm really not. I'm much more from a sort of arts background. I was a journalist professionally. I'm a running coach now, but I find it harder to be as exacting, as calculated as you have to be. You have to think, if I go down there at that angle, what will that mean? If I go too far, what will it look like? What will it look like on the way back? How do I calculate that I go at the exactly right place on the way back in the dark? So I've had 2 goes, and both times I've got to the fifth loop, but I haven't got all that far. I haven't gone all that far. So I've been fine. What's reassuring to me is even though I'm right at the end of my 40s, so far I can keep up. Physically, I seem capable. I can keep up with people, and I can. It seems like I could potentially, in previous years' courses anyway, I could physically get round. But mentally, I find it so extra tiring, because in
Yeah.
most races you're following markings, or you're following maybe at least a GPX file on your watch. And at the Barkley, you're having to be mentally alert nearly all the time. It just accelerates your tiredness, your fatigue. And there's almost no time to pause and sleep. I'm quite good at, power naps. I've done a lot of races that have gone through several nights, and been able to sort of reset myself with a power nap. But there's almost no time. And it's partly the puzzle of making, yeah, it's the mental fatigue, it's the puzzle of the navigation, and Laz's excellent instructions. I'll give you one little example. We do get some instructions, and it's something. There's one of them says, like, you get to a wall of rocks. One way round is much easier than the other, and then it doesn't say which one. So
Yeah.
um, nice of him to let us know. So there's a lot of homework you have to do beforehand as well. Really,
Yeah.
I guess in a way I've done a lot of the homework now by being out there twice, but you can only recce it on race day. Like, you're not allowed, and then he changes the route. So anyway, I'm getting off track. What I find hard, the terrain is really, really slow and really tough, because it's just very steep. It's very steep.
Yeah.
It's probably over 14,000 foot of vertical gain each loop, um, which is, yeah, almost half a UTMB, isn't it? I think. So it's very steep. You're almost always either hiking steeply up or tumbling down loose woodland, which is good fun, as long as you don't. Well, you often don't know exactly what's under that, all those leaves. So it's a lot of sort of roulette being played. But the hiking is steep, and really, like, my calves are screaming at me a lot of the time. But then on top of all that, to me it's the time, the amount of time you've got. So there's just no time. So we all make mistakes, and the mantra is sort of Don't let a little mistake become a big mistake.
Yeah.
It's spotting a little mistake. We've gone a little bit off course. Let's correct it. And of course, when you're with others, that's easier because there are 4, 6, 8 eyes and minds, working on that. When you're on your own, I suppose both times, yeah, I've made a big mistake or just got very sleepy and confused, and run out of time, and it's so frustrating. And then you wait, you have to wait a whole year to try again, and then you don't even know if you'll get back in. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I feel very lucky to have had two goes because so many people would love a go, and it is quite exclusive, unfortunately, because you can't have that many people in the park. But yeah, both very lucky to have had two goes and very frustrated that I haven't got all the way around.
Yeah, but what a journey that has been. I remember speaking to Laz and also with Jasmine Paris earlier, and we all get so inquisitive, and the stories are so phenomenal. So you were totally not going off track for sure. I can listen to this all night, all day, whenever there is time. I remember he mentioning that it's two times the elevation gain of summiting to Mount Everest. Is that's the distance you got to cover, and just thinking of it, I was getting jitters. So you have lived it, you have done it. It's just. It's unfathomable, in my opinion. Now, just small little curiosity question. When you go for the loop, can you? I know it's very lame, so forgive me. But can you not follow the group that is going? For example, when the runners were running or they were hiking, could you not go together and follow through, or how is it?
Yes, so you're allowed to be with other people up until the fifth loop, and then you're split up. So that's when I've been, less, what's the word, less efficient, I suppose, or less good at it, less competent. So I've often travelled, yeah, I've often been in the front group of anywhere between kind of 2 and 5 runners and well, hikers or whatever you want to call us. Often with, yeah, John Kelly and Jasmine Paris, Horveris, who finished the previous year. You're allowed to work together until that fifth loop, and then you're sent opposite directions. So whoever leaves first on the fifth loop can pick which direction. And almost, well, everyone I know thinks the clockwise direction is a little easier, both in terms of the climbs and the navigation. And then the next person has to go counterclockwise, anti or counterclockwise, and yeah, you're on your own then, and yeah, and then you're at your most tired. For me, both times, I think, yeah, that's been 2 nights. Yeah, 2 nights without sleep. It's been morning, but it's been, yeah, 2 nights without sleep. Or last time, yeah, it was still pitch black, and that's when I made my big mistake. Um, yeah, you're very tired. You're on your own. It pretty much all looks the same. It's steep woodlands every direction. Um, I mean, you could say, yeah, you've been around 4 times by then. Surely you'd get an idea. And I've been around 8 times. And yeah, you've got ideas, but in the dark, when you're knackered, and you're hallucinating, uh, are you sure you're going down the right slope? You're not really sure. No. It's quite the challenge. But I'm still fascinated. And can I unpick it? Can I solve the puzzle?
And so I'm assuming you're going to look forward to solving this at some point for sure.
I would like to try again, but that's out of my hands. It won't be up to me, but I will try.
Awesome, awesome. So fascinating. Thank you so much for everything so far. Now, listening to this, I'm sure a bunch of us are going to be inspired, and we want to get coached. You also you said something in the start that you had a coach, but not sure how helpful that was. Do you think it's the right strategy to actually start working with a coach in case people want to go the longer distances? Because for marathon, I've seen a bunch of runners, they do take a coach because here the primary objective generally is to run faster. Um, in the ultras, it's a lot more than just being able to cover the distance. Do you suggest working with a coach does help for people to at least get better at it?
I'm pretty biased here. I mean, my income comes from coaching runners, so I don't think you're going to hear me say I think it's a bad idea. Um, and that first coach was, he was useful to me. Like I guess he taught me how to structure a week a little bit. And then what he did also was simply the act of taking on a coach just made me more serious about, I suppose, things like lifestyle, things like drinking alcohol or going to bed and getting enough sleep, and just being more serious. about my training. So I thought, well, I've got a coach. Maybe, I won't drink tonight because I'm being serious about my training now. I'm trying to be the best runner I can be. So almost the act of having a coach can shoot you up another level, I think. I would say the bad advice he gave me is really, it was sort of like, you should lose weight, I was told. And I wasn't in unhealthy weight. We know I was playing football and hiking a lot. But that's not always a sensible thing to tell people. And eating disorders and disordered eating is pretty fairly common in running. And I don't think that's a good thing to say to people, if I'm honest. And I'm still, and yeah, for a while I probably didn't eat enough because I thought, lighter is faster. And again, I feel lucky that didn't result in injury or sort of low energy availability. And luckily, I have another friend, Renee McGregor, who I don't know if she's known to you guys, but yeah, she's a British Indian. She's got some great books and is well worth a follow on social media. But she's really world renowned sports dietitian, and luckily she lived near me, and she was giving me better advice, I suppose, which is we need lots of carbohydrates, we need lots of protein to fuel our running and help recovery. And yeah, so I was lucky, I think, that sort of I knew of her. But I think in most cases, yeah, I also found it just makes for some people, they're just more, that sense of being accountable to someone just makes them more likely to get out of the door and do the run. I do find sometimes I have to tell runners to run a bit less actually, or run a bit smarter. Take some more rest days. Sometimes it's that, but sometimes it's all right. You're running 3 times a week. Let's see if we could increase that to 4 or 5. Just gradually. Just sensibly. So yeah, I think in most cases a coach could spur someone on. It's difficult to know. Yeah, I think it was. Although there's some bad advice, I think it was useful to me. I think it did push me on.
Got it. And here I thought you were just powered by the tea. You had this world-class dietitian to work with. I thought you were only
It's
powered by
mostly the
tea.
tea. It's mostly tea.
Mostly the tea. So, talk through this, your love for the tea. I see the cup that you're holding, not sure espresso or the tea. Now I know it's the tea.
Oh,
Um,
tea. Yeah.
um, Maybe we should send you some from India. You'd enjoy some of it for sure. So, tell us the secret of powered by tea.
Yeah, I've never. I mean, I would say in Britain, coffee is nearly as popular nowadays, but I've just never liked coffee. It seems like a really sort of brash, over aggressive taste. And I've got a very similar physiology to my mother actually, and my daughter. And they both love tea. We've all got a sweet tooth, but we all love tea as well. And I don't know, my mum always had a cup of tea on the go when I was growing up, and I just love this, just a slight bitterness. No, I don't need sugar in it. A little bit of milk, and I'm vegan now, so that's usually oat or soya milk. A little bit of milk, but it needs to be a kind of a brown rather than a white flavor, a white sort of coloring. And yeah, I find water quite boring, so I mostly just drink tea through the day. And someone counted that I'd left a load of tea bags that I'd used for the day on the side, and someone counted. I thought I had 5 or 6 a day, but they counted 11. So I don't know if I'm overdoing it. I mean, the thing with ultra running, it does attract people who might go all in, doesn't it, and get a bit overcommitted to things. So I don't know if 11 cups of tea is a bit of an unhealthy habit, but a bit like the running, if I am addicted, there are many worse things to be addicted to. So yeah, I just love the taste of tea.
Nice. Is it also that you consume the tea during running, or it's when you are not running? I'm just trying to get some secret to be just.
It's if I can, I will. So
Okay.
say during the spine race, I have to wait to the main checkpoint, so I might only get there for like one main checkpoint per 24 hours. But then I will have several cups of tea, and then sometimes in my soft flasks in my race pack, I'll ask for a tea in the soft flask, and leave drinking some tea, although it goes cold very quickly. And most races, it is hard to get tea during the race, but I've done the Tour de Gion a few times, and I suppose some races, if I get crewed by someone, then they can make me tea. And the Tour de Gion had like Italian tea.
I
I'm,
can see the
you know,
expression.
I'm not quite sure what it was. It's not like our tea. It was like a weak black tea. Yeah, that was the irony. And there was, I must admit, there was a misunderstanding deep into one night. Some some language barriers, and I was handed a coffee by mistake and took a big swig. And I was like, oh, that's disgusting. And I didn't want to sort of throw it out, sort of spit it out because someone had kindly given it to me. So I did swallow it and then instantly drink something else. But I was instantly awake. I was like, wow, that's what coffee does to people. Oh, yikes. But I just don't like the flavor. It's tea for me. But I do travel. This is a bit embarrassing, but yeah, usually when I go abroad, I do take my own tea bags. Although I wouldn't need to in India, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I'm going to try and see how it does when I try and run with the tea. Rather, in India, it's very popular to have chai, um, pretty strong taste of ginger in it,
Oh,
and
okay,
yeah, so we will try and see.
okay. Let me know. Let me know. I think it could be the secret to running an eternal life.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, Now, I know we talked about your journey. We talked about some of the tips, how it works. We'll figure out over a period of time as we get feedback, and possibly the tea secret as well. But where from here now? What bigger and any better? Not sure if it can be any better. Already, what you are doing, and I know the Barkley Marathons could be one. But are you now planning to continue being at it or switch the sport?
Not really, not really. Yeah, I don't. I guess the closest sport really is sort of triathlon, Ironman stuff. But I've never, I don't really enjoy swimming, to be honest. I find it really difficult. And cycling is quite nice sometimes. I love that feeling of sort of speeding along, you know, without actually putting as much effort in. It's quite nice to just be speeding along a country lane. But over here, yeah, as over there, roads are very busy with cars, and cars and bikes don't always get on very well. Um, so I don't love the cycling. I like cycling, but don't love it. I don't even like swimming. Late forties, and the more I read about it, the more strength work is an important thing. But I don't think I'll push that to be a competitive weightlifter or anything because yeah, I don't all those extra muscles to carry around and all the extra oxygen they need that won't translate to good running performance. I'm more interested in strength work and getting strong, but I don't think I'm going to switch. I don't think I'm going to switch to that. And in the sort of what sort of 10 or so years since I stopped playing football, I have played two or three times just with local dads, a kick around in the evening. But I get so sore, and I get sore in totally new areas, and I'm if I'm honest, I'm terrified about getting injured for running. So no, I'm going to stick with running as long as I can. I know that I might have to change a bit the training. I am researching that for a book at the moment. Actually, it's sort of how can we keep run, can we run forever? How can we run the best we can as we get into our 50, 40s, 50s, 60s. And it does seem like, sometimes that might mean a bit less volume and a bit more cross training, but it's really important to keep doing the fast, the speed work, VO2 max intervals, 1, 2, 3 minutes, but then also strength work. They seem like the most important things, as well as sort of, yeah, sleeping well and a few things with diet. But I'm quite interested in, yeah, I suppose, yeah, I think it maybe is coming across. I still absolutely love, doing this stuff, and I'm fascinated in how to keep doing it as well as I possibly can while sort of fighting with my age, I suppose. Yeah, that interests me a lot. And although I said I've done a lot of the big races, I'll never run out of challenges. There are national trails to run, there are countries to run across, there are so many things to do. So it's wonderful sport.
Awesome. Be at it, and we'll keep rooting for you from the sides, and we hope that you continue to be at it for a really long time. I hope also in at some stage you happen to travel to India again and maybe do one of the ultra races here. There are a couple of pretty cool ones. I'll send you some details in case it's of any interest.
Oh, please do. My one trip to India actually got cut short. So I do feel like it's unfinished business. I visited New Delhi, and then I went north to the Himalayas. But I was only there about 10 days in total, and it was meant to be a much longer trip. So yeah, one day I would love to come back. It's a huge and fascinating country, and I'd love to experience your ultra running scene. It'd be fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah.
do let me know, please.
Will do for sure. Awesome, Damian. What a pleasure speaking with you. This has been I know must be busy for you, and being able to get time for us. Totally appreciate it. And as the reciprocation, we can send you some tea possibly back home.
Thank you.
But I look forward to remaining connected, and yeah, we'll let you know as soon as the podcast comes out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and happy running, everyone.